Hey, welcome to the show today, everyone. Now, I'm genuinely impressed by all of the people that I've personally and professionally connected with this year as a result of this podcast. So if you're one of them, special shout out to you. Hello, and thank you. Open-mindedness would be the common denominator with you lot. Now, this may be a common trait of all of those who reach out for advice, or maybe perhaps people in general are actually far more tolerant than what we've been led to believe. I think being dogmatic with your worldview is fine also, so long as you're actually seeing things accurately. If you're unsure around how things work, being as open-minded as possible seems like the best strategy. It's no different to the principles of diversification and concentration. Stubbornly sticking to just one type of investment or being tribalistic with your favorite asset class can be more about intellectual laziness, I think, than it is about investing with high conviction. Investing in shares, but being equally open to investing in real estate requires a little more mental energy, though. Investing in passive index funds when you're also a self-confessed crypto degen is also a bit of a stretch. So today, you're going to hear something that you would rarely hear covered on any other podcast because, let's be honest, it can be quite offensive. Today, we're talking about Bitcoin and Jesus. If you are already a believer in Jesus and you think he's the reason for the season and all that, or you don't, either way, you're going to be surprised about how much the Bible actually talks about money. Would Jesus be a Bitcoiner, though?
You're listening into the Everyday Investor Podcast. Passive investing, property investment, managed funds, and crypto. If you're an everyday person wanting to build new wealth for the new world that you're heading into, then this podcast is for you. I'm Darcy Ungaro, your host. I'm a qualified financial advisor, but I'm still learning how to invest better and teach others how to do the same. I talk with guests and cover a range of topics designed to get you to think for yourself here. But please keep in mind, this can't be considered financial advice. Be sure to do your own research here and seek qualified advice of your own before making investment decisions. If you want more information, check out the show notes in your podcast player and make sure that you've subscribed to YouTube also. Then follow the Everyday Investor on all social media channels. The NZ Everyday Investor Podcast receives support from the following partners: Easy Crypto, the safe and easy way to buy and sell crypto in New Zealand; Gorilla Technology, increasing business success through innovative and strategic IT solutions; Ungaro & Co. Financial Advice for everyday people building everyday wealth. Hope you enjoy the show. Let's get started.
Now, I follow today's guest on X for a couple of months now, as well as someone who goes by the name of BitPain. Because Bitcoin offends those stuck in traditional finance and Jesus offends many people too, I'm going to quote BitPain's latest post here about religion, which I think captures a little bit of the reason why people don't like Jesus too much. And I quote, "Many people who were left-wing throughout the 1990s to 2020s became anti-religion, not because of religion per se, but because they despised the politically corrupted version of Christianity that had come to dominate right-wing politics, a version that had unceremoniously been stripped of the compassion and empathy that are the hallmarks of the religion. Science and the scientific establishment became the bulwark against a political ideology that was evangelized under the aegis of Christianity, and which was not only deeply anti-scientific, but equally un-Christian. We've seen the same phenomenon happen over the last 10 years, but rather than a dominant right-wing tribe corrupting its dominant ideology, that being Christianity, we've seen the dominant left-wing tribe corrupt its dominant ideology, science." His post goes on to say, "The common thread here is that the inherent power of the human tendency towards tribalism, channeled through its modern political idiom, corrupted the truth, whether that be moral or scientific. And it perverted the core ideology not merely among opportunist politicians, but the believing public at large. I think many of the same folks who bristled at the corrupt right-wing political religious chimera that dominated the 1990s to 2010s have woken up to find that they've become the very thing that they hated." End quote. Our political worldview, our childhood, our Instagram and our LinkedIn feed can often make it hard to see things for what they really are. Pastor Alin Armstrong, aka Pastor Coin on X, is my guest today. Be it Bitcoin or Jesus, if you're unsure, do your own research. I trust many of you will enjoy this one today, so let's get started. Oh, and Merry Christmas. How are you, Alin?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. Look forward to chatting.
Fantastic. You caught my attention. I've been following you a little bit on X. You're probably the only one I've ever seen that has probably successfully, or at least attempted, to fuse Bitcoin and Jesus together and kind of make sense of it. So you caught my attention, and I want to pick your brains on this episode, which is really kind of all about faith and money. Tell me to start with, tell us a little bit about your faith.
All right. There was something about Jesus, something different about Jesus. I studied a lot of the religions. I studied Islam. I studied Judaism, which is, obviously closely linked with Christianity. I studied Buddhism, all this stuff. But there was just something about Jesus, this character, Jesus of Nazareth. And why Jesus? Well, it's pretty simple. He rose from the dead. And when I discovered that he actually rose from the dead, and this isn't just some religious mythology, that there's good history and good evidence. And actually, there really is, as far as I'm concerned, no better explanation for the evidence we have than the fact that Jesus from Nazareth rose from the dead. And if he rose from the dead, well, then we can believe and trust him with all the other things he did and claimed, because he proved it with frankly, the most convincing and powerful proof of work there ever was the resurrection from the dead, right? I mean, imagine I came to you and said, hey, I'm God in the flesh, worship me. What would you say? Probably not, right? Not without some convincing proof.
Yeah.
But if I were to tell you, well, I'm going to die and 3 days later come back to life, and I did it, things are going to change.
Right.
So that's why Jesus, he's alive, and he's the only one that can can claim that and actually back it up.
Would you describe that as an intellectual experience, or was it a little bit more broad than that, where you came to a realization in your own personal life, end of the road, that sort of story?
It was spiritual. It was mental. It was the whole facet of what makes a person a human being was involved. And I do remember the moment where it was, I got it, the light bulb moment. Some would say that's when I was born again. Some would say that's when you were converted. Whatever analogy you want to use to describe that moment. It was 2008, and something, I don't know if you can relate with this, but I physically felt something in my chest. Something turned. Some of your audience might be thinking, oh, you just had indigestion. Like, it's not a big, but I felt something physical and spiritual. You just have to experience this shift in me. And I immediately knew. I just knew it. It was as if God himself downloaded this knowledge into my brain. It was just there instantly. Jesus is the way. And that was it. Everything just made sense. It's like the scales fell off. Everything made sense. I knew that Jesus was the answer for everything. And from then on, it's just been a wild ride.
A wild ride. All right. So now that we've talked about, I guess, the spiritual conversion, let's talk about the financial conversion. So often when one kind of comes out in the sense that they've been orange pilled, or they realized what Bitcoin is and what it represents and how it can change things, people can often have a similar sort of testimony, if you like, where they kind of see the world differently. I caught up with Jeff Booth a few months ago, and we were talking about how, I guess his revelation, according to his book, is that once you see the world through the lens of Bitcoin, you realize that everything is actually getting cheaper when you denominate it in sound money. So your experience then, like, how would you describe your journey of faith in Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I was first exposed to Bitcoin many, many years ago. I don't know if if you were around back in the days of the Bitcoin faucets.
No, tell me about that.
A Bitcoin faucet was basically this website where you could go and just get free Bitcoin. You would put in your email or whatever, and you would get literally 5 or 10 Bitcoin, whatever it was, for free. It was just a Bitcoin faucet to distribute it when it didn't have really any value. And so I went to the Bitcoin faucet and I got, I think it was 5. I don't exactly remember, but I think it was 5 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And I was really young and stupid, and it was confusing, the private key, the public key. I'm like, this is too confusing. And I just, those Bitcoin are somewhere in the landfill on my laptop.
Right. Sure.
But it wasn't.
I shouldn't laugh at that. That's terrible. Sorry to hear.
Yeah, I think it had to be 2010 or around. Like, it was really, really early. Really early.
Wow.
Maybe even before that. But yeah, the Bitcoin faucet. So it wasn't until 2017 that it popped on my radar, and I'm thinking it was around $10,000 or whatever it was back then, and I'm thinking, is that the same coin thing that I threw in the garbage? I hope not. Turns out it was. So that sucked. But I thought, it's 10 grand. I don't have 10 grand. So I bought some like altcoins, some Dogecoin, some stupid stuff. Didn't really know what I was doing. Didn't really care even, just as a joke. And forgot about it. Had some kids. Life got busy. China banned Bitcoin. Scared me. Got off my radar. 2020 hits. The world goes upside down. Remember talking to my wife saying, man, they're printing a lot of money. I don't think this is going to end well. Like, just something, I had some financial education, but I don't think you have to really have much education to know, okay, you doubled the money supply in less than a year. Something's got to give. This can't end well. Then my Dogecoin pumped, and I was like, wow, that's crazy. What is this thing? It's a joke. It's a joke. Why is it worth so much? But I knew Dogecoin was a joke. I knew it even then. But I knew Bitcoin, there was something about it. And similar to my journey, my research of faith in Christ, I guess I have this obsessive personality where I see something, I perceive there's value, and I don't really know why, and so I have to figure it out. It's the same idea with Bitcoin. Like, what the heck is Bitcoin? Why is it worth, well, back then, whatever it was, 40, 50, 60, 70K Canadian? Why? This is ridiculous. I thought, I gotta be missing something, because I can't be the only one thinking there's something else going on here. Is it a scam? I don't know. Maybe. I have to figure it out. So, to make a long story short, I knew some people who were into crypto, and so I thought they'll help me, but they didn't. I was just left more confused than ever. And I went to some websites, what is Bitcoin, on Google, and still, I'm more confused than I was when I started. And I remember talking to my wife saying, I wish I could pay someone to just tell me what Bitcoin is. But I'm afraid if I do, I'll just be more confused and out of some money, So but I didn't give up. I'm like, I have to figure this out. And it wasn't until I got my hands on the Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous. Well, I didn't get my hands on it. I downloaded it on Audible. I listened to it. That it finally clicked. I was looking for a technical explanation of Bitcoin. What I needed was a philosophical, moral, and economic explanation of why Bitcoin is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I didn't need to know what Bitcoin was. I needed to know why Bitcoin is. And after I understood why Bitcoin is, the problem it solved, solves and its potential for why it was created, then it all made sense. Okay, I get it now. This is not some get-rich-quick scheme. This is not something to, you can trade it, but I'm not getting into that. This is something bigger. This is fixing a problem that is fundamentally at the heart of why humans even exist, why God made us, to multiply, to prosper, to flourish, to take dominion of the earth. And money is one of the best gifts God has given us in order to do that, so we can collaborate together in a peaceful way, and not be killing each other all the time.
Like, that's kind of ultimately where I wanted to get to really kick this discussion off, was just like, I did a bit of research for today, and I discovered that there are over 2,350 references to money. It's around twice the number of verses in the Bible that discuss faith and prayer. So, like,
wow.
I know, like, a lot of people would be critical of Christianity, churches, leaders of the church, saying they're all about money when they talk about money. And I'm sure there's some valid criticism there as well, but I think that they miss the point. It seems like God's the one with the issue here in terms of thinking about money, right? Like, he's thinking about money a lot. What are your general thoughts on that? Like, does the Bible have a lot to say about money from your experience, also from like a pastor's experience as well?
Yeah, so Jesus's parables, just Jesus's parables alone, depending on how you interpret and how you categorize them, upwards of 25%, maybe even more if you categorize some different. But about, let's be conservative, about 25%, one of every 4 parables that Jesus spoke that was recorded in the Bible used imagery or analogies of money to discuss and bring light to spiritual truths. Think about that for a second. When the Son of God wanted to teach us about the kingdom of God, 1 out of 4 times he used money as an example to help us understand it. There's something to that, right? It's not that Jesus was sitting around going, oh man, I need to come up with some parables for these people so they understand. I can't. No, he knew what he was doing. And money is sort of irreversibly connected to, like I said, our mandate as humans. How are you going to be fruitful and multiply without scaling that multiplication in a way that's mutually beneficial for everyone? We can't just labor for nothing, right? That's not loving your neighbor. I can't expect you to work for me for nothing. We need a medium of exchange. We need something where we can denominate the value of our time and energy so that we can collaborate together and we can be fruitful and multiply and not stagnate. And money is the best tool to that end.
Okay. You're probably answering my next question then, which is really just, what is money? During that time when Jesus would have been talking about those parables, it wouldn't have been that long ago where gold and silver would have been used as money, but at that time it would have been under the Roman authority. And so this would have been a currency that would be denominated by the Roman government. What do you think he meant? Like, when he was talking about money, was he talking about the currency that would have been in use at the time? Or was he talking about what people already knew that money was?
Well, it's an interesting bridge we have to gap nowadays, because in the time of Christ, money was, silver and gold primarily. And it had been for a very long time. But today, we use the same, here's the thing, we use the same English word, money, to describe the coins, the shekel, the Roman denarius, all these different coins. We use the term money, but we also use the term money to describe fiat money, dollars, and so forth. there's this massive chasm that has to be bridged when we interpret the Bible, especially when Jesus is talking about money. We cannot assume when Jesus says money that it equals dollars. See, that's the problem. Fiat money is not like the money in Jesus' time. You couldn't just print gold. Of course, the Emperor Nero did practice a form of money debasement called coin clipping, but even with coin clipping, it was a much slower process. You can't just double the supply of gold in Rome in 12 months without people going, what is going on? Like, our coins went from this big to this big.
Yeah.
We know that the emperor's up to something. It had to be a little more sly. It had to be a little more cunning back then. So when Jesus uses the term money, what he's referring to is a system of money that is sound, gold or silver. A system of money where it could be verified. A system of money that can't be easily inflated. So that bridge has to be built before we begin to even talk about what Jesus is saying. So yeah, that's in terms of what is money. I define money as a technology for storing human time and energy, for the consumption of another human's time and energy, the fruits of their time and energy. That's how I understand money.
And just going back to that phrase, fiat money, I guess listeners of my podcast wouldn't be too unfamiliar with that concept, fiat money, or by decree. Genesis 1:3, starting right there. I think maybe we should probably just drill into that a little bit, because that's quite a key verse in the book of Genesis. It talks about how God created stuff, right? So then God said, let there be light. Can you contrast that with the fiat money system then, where a government or a nation state decrees something, where they say that it has value, therefore it has value?
There's two categories here. There's what I call divine fiat and carnal fiat. So when God says, let there be light, and then, as you continue reading Genesis 1, he says, let there be several times, and creates a lot of things with that formula, with the fiat formula. Let there be. He just simply decrees, and objectively valuable things are created just on the merit of his decree. That's called divine fiat. God can do that. He has the ability to, out of his own self, from his own word, create things that are actually valuable. Carnal fiat is what you're describing, like in this, like central banks do and so forth, where they, or governments, like they just decree, thus says the government, let there be money. And there was money, that sort of thing. Human beings do not have the divine authority to decree value. Everything we create, we don't really create. We simply refashion what is already created. Right? Humans have never created a thing. We've only taken what is already there and refashioned it for another purpose. And we call it creating. It's not really creating. If you use the Genesis 1 framework for understanding creation, it's just reforming. It's innovating or something else.
Right. We're assembling, or we're modifying, augmenting something that's pre-existing. We're not actually genuinely creating something out of nothing. So I guess when you say, oh, that person's a creative person, they're just really good at forming things in a different way is kind of what we're saying, right?
Right, exactly. If you want to be literal.
Yeah.
So human beings don't have the authority to just create value from nothing, which is what fiat money purports to do. But really, it only holds value because the government that decrees it has the monopoly on violence. If they did not have the monopoly on violence, we could just discard it. We don't want your paper, whatever. Somebody else can create a money. Biblically speaking, historically, money has been a technology that has arisen from the free market organically. It wasn't that some government or emperor said, this is money, and everyone said, okay, fine, we'll just go with you because you have the monopoly on violence. Even the emperors and the conquerors of the past, they used gold and silver, which was valuable because the free market determined it was. That's why they wanted it. It's not that they went after gold and then said, now it's valuable. It was valuable. That's why they went after it, right?
Right. It was intrinsically good. Yeah.
Right. It was the free market already determined that was the best money because it had the best properties, and it just sort of, that's what it was. And people agreed on it because the free market had decided. It was not decreed money. So so again, just to sort of bring it together, the divine fiat God creates, it's good, it's valuable because he can do that. Man, we don't have the ability to do that. And when we do that, it doesn't go well. It doesn't go well, as we can see happening before our very eyes. Every fiat goes to zero eventually. But then you got to ask the question, what zero what?
That's right.
What are we even denominating this in? Eventually a fiat money gets so broken and so hyperinflated that it's literally zero, to the point of it's not even worth the paper it's printed on.
And that's the challenge, right? Is that we're so, and when I say we, I generally mean we collectively in the West. You're in Canada, I'm in New Zealand, there's a few countries in between, but let's just say the West being countries of relative comfort, and I guess trust in financial institutions are still relatively high, dropping, but relatively high. We've become so used to relying on the currency that our governments create and maintain as the denominator. We were so used to relying that as the denominator that it genuinely is hard to mentally flip that switch, isn't it? And like what you were saying before, how do we determine its value? Because what are we going to denominate that in? It's like we always need a reference point, right? And so, like I think about Russia and other countries like that, where maybe corruption inside the government is kind of something they've been dealing with for a really long time as a people. So they've kind of gotten used to it. They might be able to understand this a lot easier. And this is why I'm so fascinated around Bitcoin in particular, is that those that have relative ease don't realize just that it's the exact same system. And all it takes is a government with some bad intent to change things around, and next thing you know, they can use the financial system to basically steal from us. It's happened in other countries. We just assume it's not going to happen here because it never really has. But do you think that says a lot about maybe just where we're at in the world right now, where things are decaying, but because it's still good, we really have trouble to see the value in anything like Bitcoin, like a finite money supply?
So Rome didn't fall in a day. It took time. And as the banks and the financial system as we understand it, the dollar world crumbles, I'm of the opinion that it's not going to happen quickly. It's going to be a slow decay, sort of like the fall of Rome. Historians are split on when did Rome actually officially fall, right? There are so many landmarks, so many events in Rome where it's like, when was it officially done? I think the dollar system is going to be sort of like that. I think historians will look back on it when the dollar's dead and gone for a long time. We'll look back and go, yeah, when did the dollar actually die? When was that moment that this system collapsed? Maybe it will be a day, boom, like done. But I tend to think it's going to be a slow and steady, painful, drawn out thing. And those who are in Bitcoin and in hard money are going to feel less pain, maybe even no pain, maybe even pleasure. Yeah. Maybe we'll get out of this thing better than we were. Lord willing, that's the hope. But those of us who are preparing, those of us who understand the system, those of us who are looking for alternatives that are outside of government control, outside of an inflationary policy, I think we'll do well.
So as the financial system dies then in this scenario, which might take some time, I'm not going to put you on the spot and get me to commit to a time, but on the way to death, quite often there's sickness, right? And the sickness that I can imagine is inflation. But what are some of the other signs and symptoms of death when it comes to the financial system that you might want to comment on?
Wow, that's a good question. I think the moral and ethical decay of the West. I can't really speak of the other parts of the world. I don't know too much, but I know of the West. When we see the moral and ethical decay, I think that's a sign of sickness. I think it's connected to the money. I think since money is, excuse me, I should have turned this off.
You got the Christmas jingle already there, huh?
Oh man, I'm ready to go. Since money is connected to our time and energy, right? So money is the technology we use to store our time and energy. And if that's the case, then if that technology, if that instrument we're using begins to decay or begins to debase, maybe debase is a better word, then really what's happening is it's not just, oh, well, it's inflation, money debasement, who cares? No, you're actually now debasing human time and energy. You're, in a sense, debasing the human person when you debase money. Because our labor is not just a frivolous thing. Oh, who cares? It's just labor. No, your labor is your life energy. This is why, I know people who come from Argentina. I know people who come from other inflationary places. And in the stories of the devastation that happens to a family when their life savings gets hyperinflated to oblivion, is not something to just wink at. This is serious life-destroying stuff. This is not something to, in the West, whatever, a little inflation, who cares? But for people in other parts of the world, this is their entire life. All their life, everything they saved for their kids and their grandkids come to nothing because of a immoral monetary policy. So the debasement of the money, it stands to reason, would lead to the debasement of the person, which would lead to a moral and ethical decay, which we see happening.
Wow.
Fiat,
Okay.
right? We have fiat money, decreed value. Where else are we seeing this sort of, you must agree with my decree? It's everywhere. Matt Walsh makes a movie. What is a woman? Seriously? You had to make a documentary about that? Why? Because people are having this fiat mindset where they're saying, well, I'm born a man, but I decree I'm a woman, and now you must follow my decree. So it's infecting everything.
I guess what you're saying, though, is that when you do decree something outside of what already exists, like using fiat currency or thinking in a fiat currency way, which is really a way to hyper consume and hyper maintain and hyper earn because everything is losing value as you go. When you do that, what you're really doing is you're sucking time and energy out of the system, which can only be put there by humans, like a special time and energy, which is human time and energy. And if you got a quote to get your bathroom remodeled, heck, you've got like a whole bunch of stuff that you got to pay for in terms of materials, but then you have this labor charge. In reality, when you think about the stuff that we're building with has been around for thousands of years, labor, really, your time is just a speck in the ocean, right? But this is the thing that we often discount the most.
Yeah, labor is it's the whole point, right? I do construction on the side, and labor is the most important part.
Yeah.
Right? If someone says, oh, I want you to put some drywall up, okay, drywall plus labor, and usually labor is the biggest expense.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, I can drop some drywall in your basement, But if I don't charge you for labor, it's just going to sit on the floor.
Yeah.
It's useless.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So like moving on then to I wanted to kind of get your view on gold as well, because I personally I speak two languages. I can kind of understand gold and Bitcoin in this space. I'd be keen just to know what your views are on gold, seeing as it was basically the form of money for much of the Bible. Would you agree that gold is equally as valuable as Bitcoin?
I don't have a problem with gold or silver. I'm at a point in my life where I really only have enough income to pick one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess I could split it, but I don't really think that that's the best move for me in this point in my life. I see Bitcoin as the fastest horse in the race. I don't think gold is really going anywhere. It's going to stick around. I was talking with some guys from my church about this yesterday, actually, and we were discussing gold a little bit. And there's a thing called tether gold, right? Have you heard of tether gold?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, okay, so why not just do a gold standard? But if we do a gold standard, it's going to get tokenized. In the world we live in, the information age, the age of computers and internet, it's going to become tokenized. People aren't going to carry around gold coins. It's not going to happen in this day and age. And so it's going to become tokenized. Well, there's a tether gold. You can back up a blockchain style token with gold in the vault, but then it's just fiat again.
Right? That's right. That's
like,
right.
I think eventually what would happen if some government or institution or whatever tried to create a gold-backed currency, it would inevitably become fiat again, which is the major problem I see. I just don't trust human beings enough for them to stay honest and only issue as many tokens as they have gold. I just don't trust the human being that much. The temptation to inflate is too great. If given the chance, eventually someone will do it.
Right.
So that's really my only gripe with gold. Is it's not really even a gripe with gold. It's a gripe with humanity.
Yeah.
Right? If humans could stay honest, yeah, sure, that's fine.
Right.
But they won't. And I think Bitcoin
can't resist that temptation to do our own form of fiat, though, right? Is basically what you're saying.
Right. And the reason I like Bitcoin so much is because it's already done, right? You can't inflate it. It's in code. Bitcoin separates the monetary policy from the human.
Yeah.
And puts it onto a mathematical protocol. And math is truth. Math can't lie. So that's really why I think Bitcoin's the fastest horse in the race, because it has separated human sin from monetary policy.
Can you break that down a little bit more in terms of the human sin thing? It's probably not something that a lot of people would really think much about in terms of sin. Probably, I think maybe many people might be thinking about that as just like a bad choice. But in the sense of decay, sin is so much more than that, I guess, right? I know in the Bible, it talks about how after the Garden of Eden, right, things like there was a decay that set in. And so naturally, I guess that comes into the systems that man will try to create, including financial systems. So ultimately, every organization that we can create and spawn will have sin within it. Yeah. Do you want to kind of give us a hopefully more accessible version of what that word means?
So sin is a biblical word which means to miss the mark. So when you sin, you're missing the mark. You're falling short of a objective standard. And in terms of money, I guess you could even say, even in ancient times with gold, there were people who would sin in monetary policy, right? That's why the Bible tells us that God tells the Israelites that when they do transactions with one another, that they should do so with an equal and just scale. And so, back in the day, you have a physical scale. You'd go to the market or you'd go to buy, if you're using gold or silver or grain, whatever it was, you would put on the scale and weigh it so that you're paying the proper amount. Now, people would do fraud. They'd put a little extra weight on one side and they'd skim off, the margin, and they would steal in the buying and the selling and try to trick people. So this is what I mean by removing monetary policy from sinful man, right? With Bitcoin, there's no such thing as unequal scales, right? The system, the network is the network. If you buy something for me for 100,000 sats, you send me 100,000 sats, I can't unbalance that scale. You're going to send me 100,000 sats. I'm going to receive 100,000 sats. That's the only way this transaction goes down. I don't have to trust you. You could be the biggest crook on the planet, and still you could not create fraud in this transaction. So that's really the thing that when I understood that about Bitcoin, it was totally like, okay, this is it. This is unbelievable that we have a monetary network that has taken sin, that has taken the temptation out. You can't commit fraud now. It's impossible in this network. You could still steal, right? You could still trick me and take my Bitcoin. That's still possible. But in terms of transactions, you can't rip me off. I can't rip you off.
Why is it then that humans, and maybe I'm answering my own question here, I see parallels perhaps between, say, your story and how you came to faith in Christ and how you came to faith in Bitcoin, kind of in a similar strand, in that for a lot of people, they would see evil in both. Like they would actually distrust Jesus, or the church more specifically, I guess, and they would distrust Bitcoin as well. Why do you think that is?
They don't know either. I think that's why, frankly, they don't know and have not experienced either, or they're just hell bent against it. That's the reality too. Some people just are hell bent against Christ. No, I will never believe in Jesus. I hate Jesus. I hate God. And no matter what, that's sort of, unless God gets them, that's their take. And some people, it's the same way with Bitcoin. You could tell them all the things, you could educate them, you could show them, and still they say, no, it's a scam, it's a Ponzi, it's this, it's that. It's the mystery of the ages. Some people just don't, they're stuck in their ways.
Yeah. All right. Let's bring it in for a landing with this one. Matthew 22, verse 21. Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and God the things that are God's. Is it right that we should be paying tax?
Oh my gosh. You sure you want to end here? Okay,
why not? Let's come up with a bang, Alan.
Oh, I get a lot of heat for this, but that's okay. I'm used to it.
It's warm, right? You need the heat right there. It's getting cold in Canada.
It's getting cold. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So, okay, that story is probably one of the most misunderstood stories in all the Bible. One of the most misunderstood sayings of Christ, I think. So the context here is the Pharisees are trying to catch Jesus in his words. So the religious rulers don't like Jesus. He's sort of raining on their parade and so forth. And so they go, okay, let's catch him in his words. Let's humiliate him in public so people stop following him and so forth. So they concoct this plan, this conspiracy. They conspire together. So all you people who are like, oh, there's no conspiracies. Oh, there are. People conspire together. And this is what they did. They conspired together. They created a conspiracy. And they said, well, let's catch him in his words. And what better way to catch somebody in their words than ask them, should we pay taxes? Which is what you asked me.
Yeah, sorry. It's entrapment, man. It's entrapment.
It is. It really, no, you're right. It is. And it's the perfect way to entrap somebody. Taxes. Ask him about taxes. There's no way out. We got him. He's ours. So that's what they did. They buttered him up. Hey, teacher, tell us, you're so smart and so forth. What should we do? What did Moses say? Should we pay taxes to Caesar or should we not? Oh my goodness. Now what's Jesus going to do, right? He's between a rock and a hard place. If he says, yes, pay, then all the Jews are going to be upset All the religious Jews are going to be upset. What do you mean pay taxes to Caesar? He's the one who's occupying our land and oppressing us and stealing from us. How can you say pay taxes to the one who, how can we pay taxes to the pagan, right? If he says, no, don't pay taxes, then maybe all the Jews are happy with him. But then the Pharisees just go to the Roman guards or the Roman rulers and they say, hey, there's a guy here teaching people not to give homage and pay taxes to Caesar. Well, then Rome will just do the dirty work and take Jesus out. So what does he do? He says, show me the coin. Bring me the coin. Let me see the coin that you used to pay taxes. So they give him a coin. And he looks at it and he says, tell me whose likeness and inscription is on this coin? Well, it's Caesar's. Then he says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's. And the story ends. I remember the first time I read that story, I was like looking on the next page like, wait a minute. You can't just end it there. You can't just end the story there. That's the biggest cliffhanger of all time. What do you mean give to Caesar what is Caesar and give to God what is God's? Then what happened? And as I pondered it, I began thinking, okay, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, give him the coin. But why doesn't Jesus answer the more important question for us? I think it's because he wants us to ask the question, where is the likeness and inscription of God? Because the question was, whose likeness and inscription is on the coin? Give that to the person. But if you ask the same question about God, whose likeness and inscription, where is God's likeness and inscription? Well, we have to go back to Genesis chapter 1, where it says God made man in his image, and in his likeness he created them. What he's saying is you missed the point. It's not about the money. It's about God's image. It's about giving to God what is God's. And if you are God's image, then you, it stands to reason, must give your whole self to God. Now, think about that. If you do that, if we all collectively do that, if we all give to God what is God's, what happens to Caesar?
Less powerful, right?
He fades into irrelevance. So what Jesus is saying is, taxes are great, pay them. What he's saying is, you don't understand that the only reason you have these tyrants over you who are oppressing you and taxing you and enslaving you is because you're not giving to God what is God's. Were you to do that, then God would be your king and you would not be slaves to men.
Okay. So effectively, it's kind of like if you're not doing the most important thing, then the other thing will take over with all these other problems.
If God is not your king, then man will be your king. Right. You have two choices. The Bible categorizes taxation as slavery. All throughout the Bible, that's the understanding. The first instance of taxes is when the Israelites reject God and want a human king. And what God tells them is, okay, you want a king? Fine, I'll give you a king. But this is what he'll do to you. And the last thing God says is he will take 1/10 and you will be his slaves. So 10% taxes doesn't sound so bad, does it?
Sounds fantastic. I'd vote for a 10% flat tax rate. Sure.
But according to God, it's slavery.
Yeah.
Even 10% is slavery according to God.
Right.
David and Goliath, people don't understand. That's a story about taxes too. The king says, whoever kills Goliath will have this reward. He'll have riches. I'll give him riches. I'll give him my daughter in marriage. And the last thing is, his father's house will be free in Israel. Well, wait a minute. I thought they were already free. No, the implication is taxation is slavery. If you kill Goliath, you'll be tax exempt. You'll be tax exempt because you marry the king's daughter. If you marry the king's daughter, what does that make you? Royalty. And Jesus tells Peter, he says, Peter, tell me, who do the kings of the earth take taxes from? Their sons or from others? And Peter says, well, they take it from others. And Jesus says, then the sons are free. Then the sons are free. Well, what are the others then? If they're not free, they're slaves.
Exactly. Yeah. Interesting.
So you take the whole context into what's the word? You understand the whole context, and you'll see what Jesus is saying is, you're slaves. Give yourselves to God and be free.
A lot of this discussion, I think, has probably been like, if people have managed to make it this far, well done, right? Like, without being offended, right?
Yeah.
There's so many things that offend people about anything that doesn't agree with your pre-existing belief set, regardless of whether the other person believes it's the truth or not. But I guess the main thing is that there's a lot more to money than what probably people realize, right? And we have faith in money, but we actually have faith in currency, which is a very cheap, distorted crap version of what real money is. I think as a result, yeah, we do have a lot of pain in our life that might be unnecessary, inflation being one of them, right? So like faith in money is that pointy head where we've got to kind of think, well, if we're going to be building wealth, we need to understand what money is. And if we don't really fully understand what money is, how are we ever going to really genuinely get wealthy? But what you've been telling me sounds like if we do fix the money, we fix the world, because we can then accumulate our time and energy. And without doing that in a sound money world, we're just opening it up to be stolen from us.
You just get robbed by those who are more powerful than you. That's all that happens. And that is not loving your neighbor as yourself, as far as I'm concerned.
Wow.
I get criticized a lot by people who say, they always post on my, like, if I get a viral tweet, somebody's posting, the love of money is the root of all evil, or be careful, you're idolizing money, and they'll say things like this.
Yeah.
Here's a fundamental difference between loving money and not loving money. Maybe I'll just end with this statement. Maybe it's the most important statement I'll make. If you're building wealth in order to make humanity more prosperous and to bless your fellow humans, I don't understand how that's loving money. Before I had kids, I didn't really care about money, to be honest. I was okay with food and clothing, with these things will be content. But once I had kids, I'm like, okay, I got to get rich now. Not for me. I don't care. Look at everything I wear is free. This t-shirt, free from Bull Bitcoin. Shout out to Bull Bitcoin for the free t-shirt. I don't care. But I love my kids. And I love their kids and their kids and their kids. And so I want to be rich for them, to bless them, to help them, to make their lives better. If that's the attitude you have for building wealth, that's a selfless attitude. I don't see how that's loving money. But if your attitude is, I want to build wealth to have a Bugatti, or, whoever impression that was, some people might know, to have a Rolex watch and to have private jets and lots of women. If that's why you want to build wealth, then may the Lord bring it to nothing and humble you. But if you want to build wealth to bless the next generation, then may you succeed and may God bless you in that effort.
Well done. Thank you, Alin. I really appreciate your time today. You have a lot of really interesting perspectives there that I don't think I've ever covered that ever on the podcast. So I've covered a few things around Islamic finance in the past and a couple other things, but never really sort of gone there around some of these really important issues, especially around a topic that I thought I kind of understood, which was money, but I guess there's so much more to it. So yeah, I really appreciate your time. I know it's quite late over there, so let's let you get back to whatever you were doing, hopefully getting ready to go to bed. So thanks again, Alin.
Yeah, thank you. Can I plug my book real quick?
Oh, of course, absolutely.
So yes. I wrote this book called The Bible and Bitcoin. A Theological Exploration of Human Time, Energy, and Bitcoin. So it's a short read. It's not crazy. Go ahead, pick that up if you want to understand a bit more about what I'm saying. And there you go.
There's a link that I'll put into the show notes, Alan. I think last week or so you were doing like a bulk offer for if you bought it in Bitcoin. Is that still available?
Yeah, so you can buy up to 10 in Bitcoin. If you pay in Bitcoin, I'll give you $5 off per book. So it's $15 on Amazon. You can get them for $10 each.
Yeah.
But that's only if you pay in Bitcoin.
Cool. Pay in Bitcoin, there'll be riches in heaven, right? There we go.
Get a discount while you pay in Bitcoin. I mean, why not?
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thanks again, Alan. See you next time.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening into the Everyday Investor Podcast. Like what you've heard, but you want more? Make sure that you've subscribed to our YouTube channel and subscribe to the Everyday Investor newsletter too. The links for everything are found in the show notes that you can access easily by swiping or tapping over the cover art in your podcast player. If you received value in some way, I'd love it if you could take the time to write a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Share it with a friend, or think of our show partners where appropriate. Easy Crypto, the safe and easy way to buy and sell crypto in New Zealand. Gorilla Technology, increasing business success through innovative and strategic IT solutions. And Ungaro & Co. Financial advice for everyday people building everyday wealth. Remember, some investments or strategies discussed on these episodes may result in financial loss. Be sure to do your own research and ideally seek qualified advice of your own before making investment decisions. Hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we'll catch you next time around.